Hello, hello, and welcome back to Yesterday's Tea, where the gossip is antique, but the tea's still hot. I'm Liz.
And I'm Jordan. And in our last episode, we kind of cut off in the middle of the War of the Quadruple Alliance. And if we remember from that last episode, it was kind of an all-out mess. Selimir conspiracy had gone down, where there was that big scandal, and generally speaking, the French public and nobility really despised the alliance with England.
Oh, so much.
They honestly felt like it was a betrayal of the Bourbon households. Philippe and Philip are actual cousins, and then Philip V is uncle to Louis, so they're family. So that was kind of an unnatural thing that they were fighting. And honestly, Spanish Cardinal Alberoni really actually thought that Felipe would not declare war on his cousin.
But he banked on that.
Oh, he banked on it. And then he also banked on the fact that, the French army would desert just because of loyalty to the Bourbon name.
Yep. Which also backfired.
Right. And now, in April, we end up actually having the invasion from the northern border, which, believe it or not, it was led by Duke of Brunswick. That dude showed up in the War of the Spanish Succession, who helped secure Philip V on his throne.
I cannot wait to get to Spain. This is going to be so juicy.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to be great. So, the Duke of Brunswick... Berwick, captured San Sebastian and Fortarby, putting so much pressure on Spain that when it was chaos for poor Spain. And then, on top of that, France and Spain ended up battling in maritime over on the North American continent, where France and Spain were completely switching back and forth over the poor Florida city, Pensacola.
Yeah.
And in 1719, when France finally withdrew from the war, completely destroyed Pensacola, burned the port to the ground.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, that's all that's going on with this War of the Quadruple Alliance.
And then... that leaves King Philip V of Spain in a really precarious position. So he's got pressure from France in the north, he's got a British naval blockade that he's dealing with, and he's losing the war, and simultaneously we're going to cover this other disaster because the kingdom is going absolutely bankrupt, both as a result of that and the factors that we will be continuing.
We have figured out our next season's direction.
Right? So, the Treaty of the Quadruple Alliance forces Philip to dismiss Cardinal Alberoni. Even if that hadn't done it, his wife is no longer benefits from Alberoni either. So, she wants him out of the way because she's trying to secure the Italian provinces for her sons.
Yeah.
And Alberoni's not actually helping her get there at this point. So Philip just exiles him, dismisses him out of court. Yeah.
And so, once Cardinal Alberoni gets exiled, Spain accepts the negotiations, the negotiated terms by the Quadruple Alliance, and ended up signing the Treaty of Hague, bringing the end to the war in 1720. Ultimately, nothing happened. The treaty...
this is so messed up, yeah.
So, if you want to actually know, the original treaty was Treaty of Utrecht of 1713 that was signed by Louis XIV. Ultimately, Savoy ceded to Sicily, Austria got Sardinia. Victor Amadeus of Savoy became King of Sardinia. Spain had to renounce its claim to French power, which, I mean...
And everybody lands neatly back where they started under Louis XIV.
Absolutely.
Like, with the exception of, a couple of duchies?
A couple of duchies. Out of this, because Spain did get rid of the cardinal, they were granted the duchies of Parma, Piacenza, and the Great Duchy of Tuscany. Parma was was the queen's home region, and that was specifically given to their son, Prince Charles, who we will meet his wife later on. And so Felipe ultimately just wanted peace for the Bourbon dynasty in France. He wanted to uphold the settlement that secured Philip V to his throne, and his ultimate desire was to fix the mess that 14 had left behind financially, which loops us back to the other half of what we left off on, ending the War of the Quadruple Alliance, but finishing the tale of my mortal... I can't know, what is he? He's not my mortal enemy. How would we...
Nemesis?
Nemesis? I mean, he'd be my butterfly.
He's your Moriarty.
He's my Moriarty? He's my butterfly. If I can go back in time, I'm smushing him.
I love it.
So anyways, that loops us back to the Mississippi Company, where the cost of war had created such a massive mountain of debt, at the same time making John Law's system so attractive that the speculation and debt conversions were just and on top of the exaggerated promises, we had the pamphlets boosting the gold of the New World. And that drove the market prices so sky high on the Mississippi Company that there was ultimately actually no logical justifiable reason for the colony to be making that kind of income that they were promising.
Right. The speculative futures, man. This first guess has got dicey. So it doesn't actually take terribly long before people of means, the elite and the nobles, the savvy investors, right? Mm-hmm. They key in pretty quickly that the colonies aren't actually bringing back all these goods and treasures. They're not producing anything. And that makes them see, like here at the upper levels, that the values of the shares can't possibly be what they're being claimed, because those goods are not coming in.
Right.
So they start selling their shares, trying to convert the worthless paper that they've been sold on under this law system, back into precious metals, buying land. Yep. And then, as this is happening, on another level, just the general public also get the value of these banknotes is now so wildly inflated that you've got shoeshine millionaires, right? And even they don't need an education to go, there's no way I'm suddenly a man of means. That's not how this works. Right. So they start to understand the impending collapse, and then when they observe the nobility cashing out and trying to get their silver and gold back, they really start like,
Yep.
So, at one point, this prominent member of French society, the Prince de Conti, is said to have sent 3 wagons filled with paper demanding payment in precious metals. And the act of him doing that was seen. That payment couldn't be fulfilled, actually, so it shatters the illusion for the public. It reveals the swapping state debt for company shares for debt.
It's a trap!
It's a trap! And then, of course, that lack of return from the Louisiana territories, the discrepancy between the propaganda, which these people are actually fairly savvy to by now. This isn't the first days of the printing press.
Right.
And then the rumors coming back from the colony make it
impossible. Just absolutely impossible to hide.
Right, because there's what this actually coming back is malaria, disease, mosquitoes, swamps.
Just horror stories.
The indigenous inhabitants, of course, were quite hostile to having their land stomped all over.
Right.
So that doesn't help the reputation back home. And then the bank can't exchange the paper for precious metals because it literally doesn't have the precious metals. It does not have the liquid assets to cover that demand. So Law, back into his bag of tricks, he uses multiple manipulative tactics to silence the public. That's the first thing. He tries to prevent the panic from spreading. He writes and promotes a bunch of edicts, approved by the crown.
Of course.
By the regency.
Right.
Including severe restrictions on gold and silver coins, how much you can have and who can have them.
Which we covered in the last episode a little bit.
And I think we're going to cover a little bit more again here. Just kind of.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Specifically how they cut it down, how they handled inflation.
Yeah.
So actually, savvy investors in around the early 1720s, 1720 the year, sorry, not 1720s. Savvy investors started realizing that the bank had printed so much more banknotes, and the profits from the shares were so high that it was obvious that it could not hold the gold and silver reserves. So when they began aggressively trying to convert their paper shares back into the coin, a panic ended up rippling through the streets.
Bankrupts!
Yep. So, furious and impoverished citizens ended up flooding Rue Quincampoix and crowded other nearby trading venues as well as other Royal Bank offices. Specifically in the narrow street Rue Vivienne, it ended up turning into a death trap on July 17, 1720, and an intense bank run erupted. And so the crowds had caused such a massive, aggressive stampede when it broke out that the historic records actually state around 17 people had actually died in a single day, with possibly dozens others following that event. So, like, when this first outbreak on Rue Vivienne happened, it was just a simple riot. 17 people were crushed to death that day in that riot. And then, in the fallout of all of this collapse, more people were killed in the riots that fell out.
Right. Not to mention from the injuries technically sustained on that day. It can take you months to have an internal bleed get you. So, before May of 1720, and then after the closure of the Rue Quincampoix, authorities relocated, sorry. So they had this wild, crazy, completely unregulated Wall Street, right? The first of its kind.
Yep.
And we talked about how that gets shut down in part because of a rather shocking murder of a young noble.
Yeah.
So they move it to, the officials shut that down and move it to a much more open space. This is the Place Vendôme. Vendôme? Yeah. And then later, it actually gets moved to the Hotel de Soissons. This is kind of the beginning of the end of John Law's system. Because it showed that the speculative market didn't stand up on its own. Like, it had to be more complex than this. And then they realized they had triggered hyperinflation. So John Law reaches back into his bag of tricks. New decree. He recognized that unbacked banknote printing triggered inflation. He attempts to control that with deflationary economic reset. He tries to cool down the market, what we would call quantitative easing.
Yep.
And then on May 21st, 1720, with inflation totally out of control, he issues another royal decree artificially fixing the price of the shares while targeting the Mississippi Company shares and the royal banknotes. So he schedules a rolling reduction of share prices from roughly 9,000 livres back down to 5,000 livres by December of 1720, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the plan. But that slashed the face value of all those overprinted banknotes by another 30%. That basically rings the bell. The regent does it like in days, just days after this decree. He's got to start backpedaling right away, and does that May 27th. But by then, basically, like the jig is up. Everybody can now see the game.
Oh yeah. So, with the economic catastrophe in full swing and collapse, the government turns on John Law, and as the public grew more angry with the situation going on. And by December 1720, they end up firing John from being general controller. And you pretty much use him as the scapegoat for that epic failure that was the Mississippi crisis.
It was his fault.
Oh, absolutely.
But sort of, because they also did. They just throw him under the bus,
right.
Like Regencies will.
So accounts say, this is where I would be in history, that rioters destroyed John Law's personal carriage and hunted him through the city. They didn't do a good enough job hunting him. And so in the dead of night, he abandoned his common-law wife and 2 children a couple days before Christmas, man.
Like, just leaves them.
Yeah, December 22nd on 1720, he ends up slipping out to Brussels. And it was only a temporary haven for him. He ended up fleeing penniless. All of his extensive estates were seized by the French crown to pay off his massive debts, and according to legend, he was able to escape with a large, exquisite white diamond in his pocket.
That is the legend.
That's lucky legend.
Him. It's using character. He's the sort to pull in
I'm sure he squandered it. Probably lost in a game of cards would be my guess if he did steal it. So he spent the remaining years of his life just kind of wandering through Europe as a vagabond, worthless idol, playing high-stakes gambling games in Rome, Copenhagen, even going back to England where he was wanted for murder, where he eventually moved to Venice, where he got the pneumonia and died.
What an inglorious end to an inglorious bastard.
Man, so many chances they could have, should have, and would have.
Oh, I kind of like it when like all the powers of might and men fail, and then pneumonia got you. So then, after the collapse of the Mississippi bubble, the government attempts to return to the gold standard, but it realizes it still can't do that for the same reason it got into this mess in the first place. There is not enough gold to go around on all these banknotes, all these IOUs that they've had out here. So the Regency is left to clean up 2 economic crises.
Yeah.
And tries to correct the Mississippi bubble, which is, this Louisiana Territory purchase that's not paying out. And so they enact a second visa of all outstanding banknotes and claims. And again, the goal here was an audit to determine the true actual value of the paper in circulation versus the precious metal and other assets that they actually had available.
Yeah.
And like the first visa, the government was in charge of then deciding who got paid what. So, of course, just the basic nepotism game. Some people's banknotes are worth their full value, maybe even more, but most other people are getting robbed blind. Their banknotes are suddenly worth nothing, or deeply devalued, like 60, 70, 80, 90% devalued. So, and then remember, you had all these millionaire shoe shines, so all of a sudden also these people who were a wealthy baker, a wealthy craftsman moments ago are by the end of the year back to being destitute again. Just the money wasn't real. Like, how cruel of a trick is that all their dreams right there. No, no,
yeah.
you can't have that. No wonder these people are ticked off.
Right.
So the bakers find themselves bankrupt, but the wealthy families that we told you about in that last episode, the ones who had managed to bury their personal,
a loaf of bread.
Yep, that kind of stuff. So they get to bring their stuff back out. Now the gold standard's back. That stuff's worth something again. They reclaim them without fear of confiscation.
Yep.
But the whole thing was so deeply... It was so traumatizing to the population that the word bank becomes a dirty word in the French language, basically going to this day. They're deeply suspicious of the speculative marketplace, and clearly they have a good reason to be. Like, they tried it on and it went bad.
So now, at this point, I honestly hope that everyone can see the similarities between his system and the one that we use today. I'm sure you can draw your own conclusions by now about the economy, but this has not been my first rodeo with John Law, and his economic framework for the system operates extensively in today's global economy. Law pioneered core architecture for modern finance, a central banking system using fiat currency unbacked by a physical commodity as a concept for managing sovereign debt through equity, and the use of credit expansion to stimulate trade and employment. Modern economies largely function off these foundations and through several mechanisms. Almost all central banks, such as the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank, issue a fiat currency. Law's concept of money is merely a medium of exchange for a credit claim, rather than something that must be intricately backed by gold or silver. This is
intrinsically, that's the word you're looking for.
Backed by gold or silver, and that is a universal standard. John Law's Bank General was a prototype to central bank systems. Today's central banking platform is nearly the exact same functions, such as managing money, settling interest rates, and providing liquidity to grease the wheels of commerce. Law's strategy of using a state bank to absorb and restructure and monetize national debt closely mirrors modern policies such as quantitative easing, which is in central banks purchasing government bonds to inject capital back into the economy. His Mississippi company combines state fiscal power, tax collection, and global trading monopolies. While private entities could no longer collect national taxes, the modern public-private partnerships seen in major corporate bailouts and state-sponsored economic development share the similar spirit of intertwining corporate and state interest. John Law's primary flaw was using excessive paper money creation to artificially inflate the share prices of his own company. Today's central banking policies can similarly lead to speculative bubbles and asset inflation rather than real productive economic growth that we see today. The fundamental difference today is not the method used, but the institutional safeguards that are employed today. Through transparency and regulation, the systems are in place as an emergency tool to possibly mitigate any damage, but not actually prevent a total economic collapse. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I really hate this man.
Shareholder buybacks. Okay. So, before we go on, we do need to give you guys a trigger warning. What comes next is we are going to talk a little bit about the human cost of this scam. That's what it is. It's a scam. So here's your trigger warning. We are going to be talking about slavery, human trafficking, and some medical disease stuff.
It's mainly the bubonic plague.
We're not going to get into the gory medical details like we did under Louis XIV, but this is your actual trigger warning. There's a lot that goes on this subject that is absolutely worth covering, and over the course of this channel we are going to cover it. For the purpose of this episode, we are having to gloss over some of that. This does not indicate our diminishing, this shouldn't mean that we're trying to diminish this part of the story. It's just that that's not what we're covering here today. So we do want to say, we here believe that Black Lives Matter.
Absolutely.
And for the victims of human trafficking, past and present, we see you, we stand with you, today and every day.
Yep.
Now, as for that discussion on medical disease, it's nothing like Louis XIV's medical episode, as I mentioned, but we are going to talk about the bubonic plague spreading across the European continent just a little bit. And we are going to, this time, new thing, we improve every episode.
Try to.
We're going to post the timestamps on these sections.
So if you want to skip
any one of these pieces, you can do that.
And also,
then take this minute, if this is the end of you for the episode today, go ahead and just take a minute to like, share, subscribe if you haven't yet.
Yeah. And
so, giving you a moment to skip now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, onward to the human cost. Oh, which just, it is all human cost.
We totally came in dancing, too.
The human cost. Ooh. Welcome back to yesterday's tea. So picture this. It's 18th century Paris. As we've covered, you're a nobody and everybody. You're suddenly rich. You're buying and selling stocks at the Rue Quincampoix during the 1719 boom. And then almost immediately you start hearing whispers around the taverns, the nearby market. The colony isn't finding gold yet. These missions aren't producing anything. And it's nothing but a hot, humid, mosquito-infested swamp. And then the settlers are clashing with the indigenous inhabitants who don't like their land being trampled on, and dying of starvation, tropical illnesses. And so the public starts getting real suspicious, like the general public, bakers, shoe shines. So they're thinking now, sell everything, and get the only thing they still can get, because they can no longer get gold and silver. So what do they need? The only thing with actual intrinsic value left to them, land.
And all they have is the paper shares.
And they have, right.
And what do you think they're paying you out with? More paper shares, because they don't have the gold to do it.
Right. Shares that are just took a 30% drop in value.
50%.
50%, you're right. I think I said 30 earlier.
You did.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
You did.
My bad. That's a 50% drop. They slashed those prices.
Yeah. Now, if only you actually knew how dire the situation was, more than just what the tavern talk suggested. Voluntary immigration had slowed so abruptly as the rumors had reached the homeland that this had become a huge problem for the grandeur illusion across the ocean. So the colony is facing labor shortages, and to address it, the first people that he sent over there, or like the crown kind of was like, hey, we'll give you this if you go over there, were prisoners. And they offered pardons and freedom in exchange for indentured servitude if they would go over and
work the
colonies. And a lot of prisoners took them up on that. They went over there and got fried and had a good old time. But eventually the supply of willing prisoners and settlers ended up dwindling. And so the government ended up authorizing a paramilitary recruiting police force called the Bandoliers. And they would round up idle men. And the Bandoliers were paid per head. So without regulation or oversight, it became state-sanctioned kidnapping off the streets of Paris, and no one was safe.
Yeah. So You notice how ambiguous that term "idle" is, and we've brought it up a couple little foreshadowing earlier. It was a loaded term even in its own time, and it's used by the state, really the bandoliers, to criminalize absolutely anyone who even seems to not be participating in the economy or was thought to be a drain on society in some way. So being deemed idle becomes this catch-all excuse to send anyone, everyone to the colonies.
Oh, yeah.
And the squad, the bandoliers.
I hate this mouse sometimes. It does that kind of shit.
Okay, I got it.
Ugh.
No, what is going on here?
I don't know. I hate when it does that.
Are we...
it does weird shit sometimes like that.
Okay, I think I've got her out of the way now. That's fine. So basically, they empower the bandoliers to clean the streets of undesirables. And then John Law, who's the guy who enacts this policy, being the most undesirable of them all.
Right?
Anyway, so that's just ironic. So homeless beggars, the local drunks, even you remember we talked about boys could get locked out of the city if they got home too late. There's a strict curfew, so people out after curfew, particularly young people, anybody who wouldn't be missed right away. And they get these guys at first, like the first offer is a job. I mean, a lot of them are there's no prospects in France. There's nothing happening. People are starving, right? So they're saying, "Hey, we'll let you go to this land of riches, the territory, the land of riches and opportunity. Teach you a skill. You'll be able to make a new life for yourself outside of all of this." Boy, doesn't that sound promising? And even still, they can't get enough people to go.
Right.
So then they just start calling everybody kind of idle.
Right.
If you are a day laborer or traveling not salesman, but like craftsman, this is before employment becomes the standard, right?
Right.
So a lot of times you'd have these craftsmen that would take on contract jobs. Those jobs would last for months or a project or whatever. And then they'd got to move somewhere else to find somebody else who needs that particular service. So they're taking these guys as they're between contracts by calling them idle. They're saying they're not looking for work. And they even go so far as to just basically start taking people out of the pubs. Like, basically, you could come home from a long day of work, put your feet up at the pub, and the bandoliers could walk in and be like, "That guy looks idle." And
there you go.
Out you go.
Bye-bye.
So, that's how that went down.
And now, also, since we just discussed men, women. They sure hell did not want to go to the New World either. But we can't have a colony of all men, so that's just not going to work, right?
That's not how that goes. Yep.
So women were snatched from the streets just as freely as idle men because they were idle women. And that was even a broader term. Like, for instance, we would be considered idle women because we're not married. I'm definitely insane. Oh, I'm poor. So, I covered it all. Prostitutes were frequent targets and obviously vanished the most often. And then the government would also raid, like, sanitariums, hospitals, workhouses, and they would pretty much ship you out as long as you weren't, like, actually physically disabled, insane in a way, like, you can't work.
Anybody that they think is kind of even remotely able-bodied and idle.
Anyone who's a child bearer, pretty much, is what they were sending over to the colonies.
That too.
Because they needed a population for the next generation of French colonists.
That's how long-term colonizing works.
Yep. So, as a servant, that should have been in a different place. As a servant, if you were out visiting your family, running an errand without a note from your master, The bandoliers.
Your own household servants were now getting kidnapped.
Yeah, your own household servants are also going missing because the bandoliers would just snatch them off the street. That was supposed to go following the prostitute topic. Somehow this got snippeted in the wrong spot.
My bad.
So, nope, that was me, I think. Anyway, so going back to that workhouse comment that we made about those women, the most notable of the, invasion of the stolen women were from Hospital de la Sepiteri.
Hospital de la I'm about to get it. Salpêtrière. Salpêtrière?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't speak French. You're the one learning.
Okay.
And that was in Paris. So it was a prison workhouse for fallen women. And a fallen woman is an unwed mother, a disobedient wife, someone declared a sinner, even the disabled, mentally ill, simply poor people, just like I was explaining. And they were promised their freedoms and to be pardoned for their sinful crimes if they would marry a random stranger and take a one-way trip for the glory and honor of France.
Married.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
And now, most women actually would object to this offer then they were forcibly taken. Like, you had the option of, I'll marry him, sure. But then most of the time, if you're like, no, I don't want to do that, they would still take you anyways.
Right. And give you no choice about the fellow you were going to
Yep.
They did try to let people kind of hook up, sort of.
Right.
At least in the beginning.
So, if you were forcibly taken, you were brought into like a courtyard, the dock, something of that nature, and you were pretty much chained to your male equivalent, which was literally whoever was standing right next to you. He himself was probably some sort of vagrant, criminal,
random ne'er-do-well.
Yeah.
Or perhaps unfortunate, like, you could also have this place where it was just two random craftsmen or random people of skill who have no business being here at all. Actually, not that anybody does, but like
Right.
people who aren't even jobless.
Right. And yes, that's right. I said they chained them to the partner next to them. And this actually has no connection to the English idiom ball and chain. We ended up looking that up because I was like, no way, don't tell me that's the origin. And I'm actually glad that it's not. France, actually, the French crown under Philippe actually had ordered the citizens to be chained together because they didn't trust the public to go willingly.
They knew they were going to run at the docks.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Not even would they go to the dock.
Right.
Yeah.
So then, after you were partnered by a guard with whoever, right, you were forced to repeat your wedding vows to any random official. Like, some places had priests, like, literally, like, lined up at the docks, right? But other places weren't so lucky. They just had random state officiates. They marry them kind of like en masse. Yep, vow. You have no choice. Shut up. Get on the ship.
Yep.
And then they have to endure the rather arduous journey on ship to North America. There are hundreds of couples chained together per ship. They've been forcibly married, and in one route, you're going to have to march on foot all the way to Port Rochelle or another French port, and that journey could have lasted anywhere from 290 miles to 320 miles, depending on the road, like where it's coming from, right?
Yeah.
Also, whatever road the guard decided to take, he doesn't necessarily know or take the best route, right? And,
walking in circles.
Right? Some assholes out there lost.
Right.
So, of course, on the road, even before you get to the port, even before you board the ship, people are dying of starvation. They're already, like,
malnutrition, disease-ridden,
right?
parasites.
They went after the vulnerable first, so some of these people don't even get to the freaking ship, and then many don't survive that further journey. 10 weeks, harsh conditions, very little food. The food that you are getting isn't good. It's bad. People are dying of disease. They're not screaming these ships for anything, right?
Not.
Anyway, and the thing is, this is also happening in full view of the public. It is happening to the public in full view of them. So all of a sudden, this American dream that John Law has been selling just gets shattered. There's no Louisiana paradise. If there was paradise over there, you certainly don't have to shackle people on the way in, right?
Right.
So, on the bright side, if you did survive the march and the transatlantic voyage, you were free after. So you're supposed to stay and take care of the colony. And lots of people did that. Some of the couples stayed married. Many of them kind of believed in the project. They didn't necessarily need to be kidnapped for this to have been a good deal for them.
Right.
Right? However, of course, there's no enforcement out there in the Louisiana territory, so a bunch of couples, like, straight up nope out just as soon as they leave off the American docks. They're just like, okay, never want to see you again.
Right.
And then just vanish.
Yeah. And so, the Company of the West was established in August 1717 by our scoundrel, John Law, who he had received total monopoly over trade in French Louisiana and North America, popularly and informally known as the Mississippi Company, because its primary focus was commercial development and exploitation in the Louisiana Territory, and quickly expanded its reach. Law absorbed the lucrative French tobacco and African slave trade through the Compagnie de Senegal in May 1719. Law ended up merging the Company of the West with the original French East India Company, founded under 14 in 1664, and the Company of China. Now, because the Company of the West controlled all of these companies across both hemispheres, it was renamed Compagnie des Indes, which officially became the Compagnie Perpetuelle des Indes in 1719. Now, Philippe...
So, we know that year, because that's where we started this mess.
Yep.
1719. Everybody's rolling.
Yep. Felipe issued an edict granting the mega corporation permanent perpetual status and extended the monopoly's control over the mint and royal taxes.
Ta-da!
Are we seeing why I really hate him?
So, if we were to truly deep dive the complex history of slavery and human trafficking here, we simply would not finish this part of the story and actually get to the French Revolution. There's going to be an entire season dedicated basically to this at some point. I think there must be, because it's a subject of its own right, not defined by geographical borders.
Yeah.
Someday, far future, we've got this project for a while.
Yep.
So, that deserves the proper time and dedication, but we can't spare that right now. Just because we cannot give it the depth it needs doesn't mean that we are taking this subject lightly. But before we discuss what we have gathered for the rest of this episode, again, we do want to apologize for any potentially offensive language.
I thought
we took this whole thing out.
Yep.
At a historically accurate. Oops. Well, all right. So before 1719, there were some instances of slavery, including some instances. How did that get in there?
Because they weren't bringing in slave ships until 1720s. So,
I see. Okay, so not to minimize this too much, because under Louis XIV, the Code Noir, we're already starting to do a lot of human trafficking out of Africa, right? And in the Caribbean. So before 1719, what?
Huh?
What? There's instances of slavery, including, of course, the indigenous people, some number of Africans in the region, as early, of course, as 1704. And then the first explicit slave ship is called the Aurora, which meant daybreak in French. It arrives in Louisiana on June 6, 1719, cargo of 200 surviving captives. And according to the records, that was the only trip she made to the territory. Aurora departed France for the kingdom of Wida, which is modern-day Benin today, to collect a cargo of 201 African people. Sorry, that's not cargo. To collect a kidnapped 201 people from Africa. Despite a grueling journey, only one person actually lost their life, so like we said, 200 made it, but 11 crew members died. Karma.
Right?
Before docking on the Dauphin Island. This marked a sort of sustained transatlantic slave trade to the French Louisiana Territory between 1719 and 1731. The Company of the Indies oversaw the shipment of an estimated 6,700 enslaved people, the vast majority arriving in 1720, many ripped from their homes in Senegambia or the Bight of Benin regions of West Africa. And then, of course, these enslaved people are forced to clear that land, work those fields. They become and because French craftsmen and laborers are scarce, and many, what?
They were trained to be blacksmiths.
Oh, they were right. I missed the connector piece. So, because the trained craftsmen, France was having a hard time getting those over there. They're scarce, so then these enslaved people are also trained to do those jobs. And then despite that, they established their own markets and a barter system, formed communities that contributed to the development of the unique cultural blending traditions of West Africa, indigenous tribes, and French practices we now recognize today as the Creole. So that's where that started. Now we're going to jump into the violence and abuse of the plantation owners. So, oh, I see what this is.
Mm-hmm.
Before we begin, please join us in taking a moment of silence for all of the lives lost at sea at the hands of slave owners throughout all of history, and for their descendants who still suffer at the harsh hands of that same white supremacist authority today. Please pause for a minute.
And thank you for joining us for our moment of silence. And now let's address the laws that made the abuse acceptable. In 1720s, they were highly significant for French slavery because when the Company of the Indies heavily accelerated the trafficking of enslaved Africans to French Louisiana in order to regulate the influx, local colonial authorities and the French crown adapted Code Noir of 1685 into specific administrative orders for the French colony. And in 1720, the Company of the Indies began imposing strict dress codes on enslaved and free people of color in the territory, which laid the groundwork for the formal codification of Code Noir in Louisiana under King Louis XV in 1724.
Now, according to French colonial laws, primarily defined by the Code Noir, which, remember, starts under Louis XIV, 1685, and then 1724, where it's getting its hold in the Louisiana territories, legal slave status is determined by birth, captivity, or judicial punishment. Children automatically inherited their mother's legal status. So if a child's mother was a slave, that child was born a slave. If the mother was free, the child was born free regardless of the father's status. That might have something to do with the father's status being so wantonly unreliable.
Right.
Individuals captured in Africa and purchased by French traders or colonial companies like the Company of Indies were legally classified as slaves upon entry into the French territory. That law legally defined those individuals as muables, movable property, or chattel. This is chattel slavery.
Mm-hmm.
meaning that they could be bought, sold, bartered, or inherited. Free people could be forced into slavery if they harbored runaway slaves. In certain administrative, remember this is being administered kind of as a free-for-all. Everybody's adapting the Code Noir to the flavor of their world, right?
Yep.
Free individuals who could not pay heavy fines or taxes were sometimes then sold into forced labor to cover their debts.
So these laws mandated that all slaves be baptized into the Roman Catholic Church. While baptism was mandatory upon arrival, the legal system used their non-Christian birth background as initial justification for the enslavement of the African population, Under the Code Noir, both the 1685 Caribbean version and the 1724 Louisiana version of Code Noir, punishments for enslaved individuals were severe, highly structured, and designed to maintain total control through physical terror. The law prescribes specific corporal and capital punishments depending on the offense.
So punishments for running away, for example, or marriage, were for the first offense, the slave's ears were cut off. And they were branded with a fleur-de-lis on one shoulder. And then on the second offense, the hamstring tendon behind the knee was cut, and they were branded on the other shoulder. So now you can easily see a glance, oh, this person's run away twice. Third offense, death.
Yep.
Death. For theft, punishments ranged from public flogging or branding to death, depending on the value of the object, the circumstances, and the judge's description.
Of course.
How heavy did that pastrami sit today? Theft of horses, cattle, or other livestock was punishable by death. And minor thefts of food or other goods could be punished by public whipping or a fleur-de-lis brand. Striking or drawing blood on one's master or a member of the household resulted in immediate death sentence. Like, you do this, you die.
Yep.
While confronting a free individual, again, depending on the severity, the enslaved individual was generally treated harshly without being killed. Ish. Slaves were forbidden from any social gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Any. This includes weddings, meetings, and if caught, they were publicly flogged. If they continued to hold gatherings, the master could be held accountable and charged for fines. So the master has a real interest here in preventing these people from gathering at all, because he too can be fined for that.
He could even lose his slaves because they're refusing to listen to him.
Right.
He doesn't strike enough terror into them to control them. So
you must strike more terror into your slaves. So common.
Right? So masters were legally allowed to chain their slaves and beat them with rods and ropes. Masters were technically forbidden from torturing, mutilation, or executing a slave without some sort of judicial trial. However, courts rarely enforced these restrictions against the white man. If they were found guilty of any of these crimes, they could be subject to criminal punishment, fines, and even, like I said, have the slave confiscated. Now, as we know, no white man in history had ever been punished for any of these cruel inflictions under these laws, highlighting how the legal system was rigged to protect the owner and not their property.
Yeah, those promises were on paper only. They had nothing.
Yeah.
Like everything else at the time, backed by nothing at all.
Yep.
So there are countless cases, of course, where the law failed to punish the master for these abuses. But one of the most infamous examples of that is the law failing to punish a master by the name Lejeune Casey. Lejeune Casey. In present-day Haiti. Now, coffee planter Nicolas Lejeune tortured... Oh, not the case.
Mm-hmm.
The Lejeune case. I don't know why I've got that capitalized there. How silly. The Lejeune case in present-day Haiti. Coffee planter Nicolas Lejeune tortured two enslaved women, Zabeth and Mary Rose. He burnt their legs with fire. He also tortured and killed at least 6 other enslaved people whom he suspected of a poisoning conspiracy. And in a highly unusual move, 14 enslaved people fled the plantation and successfully petitioned a local magistrate to hear their case. Royal judges and Governor General Alexandre de Vincent investigated and found definitive, gruesome, physical evidence of torture that violated the code. So the law's in clear violation. This is the most clear-cut example we're going to get, right?
Yep.
The colonial planter class, however, rioted. Yeah. They signed petitions, they pressured the court, they argued that punishing the white master would destroy the racial terror needed to keep the slaves compliant, and so the local court just completely acquitted the guy anyway.
So this is the PG version of what I went down with the rabbit hole with the Lejeune case. American Horror Story does some really good, types of, bodies found in houses horror plots. There is some, straight up, no found evidence of cannibalism, but, the, butcher house. It was a house of horror. Right. It was everywhere. There wasn't hiding it. He had fun.
Oh.
Yeah. For as disgusting as what we discussed, it was gross, from what I found.
Okay.
Yeah.
And take that part?
Yeah. So, with that being said, we come to the end of our research on slavery for this story. And these laws were designed to impose racial, economic, and social structure, but they ended up cultivating a place for some of the most horrific, unspoken crimes against humanity to occur. And still, 300 years later, we have to have this conversation about Black Lives Matter and human rights. Slavery is so intertwined with the economy that its consequence still shapes labor, wealth, and the authority we experience today. With that being said, this is the end of the human toll being exacted on this particular chapter of the colonial system. The consequences that still shape the globe to this day. And I would like to emphasize at this point, I fucking hate John Law for all of this. Felipe got duped, and we're still suffering the cost. Now, last but not least, we're going to switch to the last major outbreak of the bubonic plague of Western Europe in Marseille. Now, Marseille is a port city that dealt with trade primarily from the Ottoman Empire and along the Mediterranean. So, in the southeastern of France, where the city is located, they were experiencing state-sanctioned kidnappings, forced deportations, a collapsing economy on top of everyone dropping dead from the bubonic plague. Now, this epidemic began when a ship named the Grand Saint Antoine arrived from the Levant with precious cargo of silk, spices, and treasures from afar that everybody wanted their hands on and probably really couldn't afford at the rate they were going. So, hidden in the beauty was death. And because the ship had not been properly quarantined, once the infected crew member had entered the city, an invisible passenger escaped, and it swept its reign of terror through Provence. And it remained largely isolated because of the government's quick response after a slight delay with the Quadruple Alliance. And when the military deployed to help with the quarantine by setting up barriers, suspending all commerce and travel around the area, as well as required health certificates for any movement over the boundary wall.
Yep, and they actually built literal walls to stop the spread of bacteria.
Good job, guys.
So the wall was 17 miles long, 6.5 feet tall, 2 feet thick. Okay, This is the wall around Marseille. It stretches across the Vaucluse Mountains and was constructed for the defensive boundary protecting the papal territory city of Comtat Venetian, which somehow actually remained plague-free. And in that line, of course, the wall was guarded by soldiers who authorized movements around the containment zone and were ordered to shoot on sight anyone attempting to cross without all the proper documentation. Records state that by 1722, when the plague ended, anywhere from 76,000 to 126,000 died across the province, which was an estimated 50% of Marseille's old family households vanishing in that time.
The plague is called the Plague of Marseille because it erupted from the port of Marseille, but it spanned specifically just the lower region of Provence. And it was the last
It's the last of the big plague
of the bubonic plague in the European continent. I cannot say in the world. I know the bubonic plague is still active around the world today, though the outbreak cases are very...
But when people talk about the plague and that critical moment, this is the specific outbreak they're talking about sometimes?
This is the last outbreak.
The last one.
Where a massive population died. 50% of Marseille lost their old family names.
And all that wealth.
Yes. So that actually brings us to the end of our episode. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you guys being here. We do have a few, announcements before we do go.
First, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, whatever you want to say first.
Oh, I was going to say, first, if you haven't yet, please go ahead and hit that like, subscribe, and share button if you love what you are seeing. We would love to keep doing this, and like you can see, we've had some real interesting episodes, but we are constantly working on improvement. So if you're interested in helping us take that journey, please go ahead and hit those buttons. They really help.
Absolutely.
And we do have another announcement, though.
We are dropping down to once a month.
Again,
it's just going to be easier on research, school. It's just going to be easier in general. We're figuring out editing stuff. We finally got our flow to Patreon, so we're going to try to start figuring out how to post to the Patreon. The Patreon is where you're going to get to actually see the smoke session. You'll get to see us go through the entire episode as we're getting
like our dress rehearsal.
Yep, you'll get to see all of that, and then we'll post on YouTube this pretty much censored version without the smoky atmosphere.
Yeah.
And so join us next month for another episode on Louis the 15th. We are ending the Regency pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, we're getting there. Anyway, it's going to be a great story to tell. We had to do some glossing today. We've got lots of juicy details coming up. Thank you so much for being here. We cannot wait to see you again next month. And so until next time, live long and prosper.
bye.